Today's story happened while I was working as a food delivery rider. I worked as a delivery rider for quite a long time, from the age of 19 until I enlisted in the military. As you probably know, the job is simple. You ride a motorcycle to a restaurant, pick up the order, and deliver it to the customer. Now, before I start the story, there's one thing you need to know about the delivery app. On the app, there's a tab that shows all unassigned orders waiting to be accepted. Once I accept an order, it moves into the assigned tab. After I pick up the food from the restaurant, the order status changes to in progress. Finally, once I hand the food to the customer, it changes to completed. The system is managed automatically, and even administrators normally can't just delete orders whenever they want. Keep that in mind, because it'll matter later. At the time, I hadn't been working as a delivery rider for very long. I'd been doing it for about 6 months, but by then I already knew my town like the back of my hand. That day, just like any other, I accepted a delivery request. I checked the address and looked at the map in the app. It was in an area I delivered to fairly often. But this order took me much deeper inside the neighborhood than usual. Without thinking much about it, I picked up the food from the restaurant and headed toward the destination. Business was slow that day, so I only had that single order with me. As I got closer to the address, the streets became narrower and narrower. Eventually, the alley was so tight that I couldn't ride my motorcycle any farther. So I parked the bike at the entrance, picked up the food, and continued the rest of the way on foot. The neighborhood was made up of narrow residential alleys. But once you entered one alley, it split into even smaller ones. And those split again into even narrower passages. It was like a maze of tightly packed houses. That area had always been known as a creepy place. People joked that once you went in, it was hard to find either the entrance or the exit. Even locating the front door of a house could be a challenge. Still, I had gotten pretty good at navigating with the map, so I eventually found the right building. It was a 2-story house. The problem was, I couldn't find the entrance. Where is it? It has to be around here somewhere. With my phone's map open in one hand and the food in the other, I wandered around the block. It was the middle of winter, and my hands were freezing. But I kept circling the building over and over. No matter how many times I looked, I just couldn't find the entrance. At that point, I did what every delivery driver does. I tapped the call customer button in the app. When you use that feature, the system connects the call through a temporary relay number. That means the rider never sees the customer's real phone number. Instead, the customer sees the rider's number while the actual number stays hidden. So I called the customer and said, "Hello, this is your delivery driver. I'm sorry to bother you, but I've been looking everywhere and I just can't seem to find the entrance to your building." There was no response. That happens sometimes. Some customers answer the phone but get distracted and don't say anything right away. So I spoke again. "Hello, this is your delivery driver. Can you hear me?" A moment later I heard a woman's voice. It was quiet, low, almost emotionless. "I can hear you." For a second I froze. Then I said, "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, but I don't deliver to this area very often, and I can't seem to find the entrance to your building. If it's not too much trouble, could you come out to the entrance for just a moment? Or if that's difficult, could you at least tell me how to get in?" There was a brief pause. Then she simply replied, "I'll wave to you." The call ended immediately. I figured she probably didn't want to come outside because it was cold. I thought, well, delivering is my job. That's what I'm getting paid for. So I looked back toward the building. It had windows on every side of its square-shaped exterior. Then I noticed her. A woman was standing at one of the windows, looking directly at me, slowly waving her hand. Her hair looked filthy, matted together, tangled and unkempt. It was long, hanging loosely around her face. She stood at the window with one arm raised high above her head, slowly waving in my direction. I remember thinking, I told her I couldn't find the entrance. Waving from the window isn't exactly going to make a doorway appear. So I sighed and kept searching. I walked around the building again, and then wandered farther into one of the narrow alleys. I figured maybe I'd spot another entrance if I kept going. That neighborhood backed right up against the mountain. As I walked deeper in, I came across something I hadn't even known existed. It looked like a tunnel, or maybe an old bunker carved into the hillside. The rock face had a huge opening in the middle, large enough for a full-size sedan to drive through, but the entrance had been completely sealed off with a heavy iron gate. Come on, you know what I mean. This wasn't some undeveloped area or anything. I live in Busan. Seeing a cave just sitting there in the middle of the city completely caught me off guard. I remember thinking, wow. I had no idea something like this even existed here. I've lived in Busan for so many years, and I never knew this place was here. Still holding the delivery bag, I stood there for a moment, staring at the cave in amazement. Then I snapped back to reality. Right. I need to deliver this food first. So I looked back up at the building again. When I looked back up, the customer was still standing at the window, waving at me. But did you notice what was strange? Every window on that side of the building faced my direction. No matter which way I walked around the building, she always appeared at the window closest to me, waving from the exact spot as if she had been waiting there all along. What felt strange was this. Normally, if someone is waving from a window and you move, they'd have to look around to find you again. But she never did. It was as if she already knew exactly where I would be, and was simply waiting at each window before I got there. She kept waving in my direction. You know how sometimes you just get a bad feeling? At that moment, I suddenly thought, wait. I don't think she's actually waving at me. Even so, she was facing my direction, so instinctively I turned around to see if someone was behind me. Behind me was the tunnel I had just been looking at. The moment I turned and looked toward it, I realized that someone who hadn't been there just a moment ago was now standing inside the tunnel. The figure looked eerily similar to the woman at the window. I couldn't make out the woman's face clearly. She had the same long, tangled hair, but one thing immediately stood out. She was dressed entirely in white, wearing what looked like a traditional Korean funeral robe. Think about it. This was the 2020s. Seeing someone dressed like that in modern-day Busan was unsettling enough on its own. I remember thinking, why isn't she looking at me? I don't remember seeing her here before. Then, all of a sudden, our eyes met. The moment our eyes locked, she slowly raised her hand and waved at me, exactly the same way the woman in the window had. That's when a chill shot down my spine. Every hair on my body stood on end, and real fear finally hit me. I couldn't bring myself to turn away from her. But at the same time, I couldn't just keep staring while she continued waving at me. I was completely trapped, with no idea what to do. Slowly, I began backing away, one step at a time, still clutching the food in my hand. Then I snapped. I dropped the order at the nearest entrance I could see and took off running. I sprinted back the exact way I had come, without looking back even once. Even now, I'm certain I ran back the exact same way I had come. I was only around 20 or 22 years old at the time. There's no way I could have forgotten a route I had just walked through, so I kept running down the path I knew I had taken. But no matter how far I ran, I always ended up back in front of that tunnel. That's when panic completely took over. Oh damn. I'm screwed. What am I supposed to do? Every time I found myself back there, the two figures were still waving at me as if they had been waiting the whole time. I ran again. And again. I kept sprinting until my lungs felt like they were going to burst. Eventually, I was so out of breath that running wasn't any faster than walking. I knew I couldn't keep going. The place where I always ended up was the narrow space between the tunnel and that house. Just before reaching it again, I collapsed onto the doorstep of a stranger's house at the corner, completely exhausted, trying to catch my breath. I sat there gasping for air. Even after stopping, the fear never went away. Looking back, it felt like I'd been trapped there for almost an hour. My breathing was still ragged, and before I knew it, tears started streaming down my face. I had no idea where things had gone wrong. I didn't even know if there was any way out of the situation. I was terrified. I was only around 20 years old at the time, and I finally broke down crying. Damn it. I was just trying to make a living. Why is this happening to me? I was sitting there sobbing uncontrollably when I happened to turn my head slightly to the right. From where I was sitting, I could see the house on the corner. There was a flag standing in front of the house. A large flag. It immediately caught my attention because none of the other houses around it had anything like it. I thought to myself, maybe I should ask the people living here for directions. So I walked toward the house. The moment I reached the front gate, it slowly opened on its own. Then a woman appeared. The first thing I noticed was her eyes. She was wearing heavy black eye makeup, almost like thick mascara covering her eyelids. Her lips were an intense, vivid red, about the same shade as the product red iPhone 7. She looked to be somewhere in her 50s. Not quite an elderly woman, but older than middle-aged. She slowly looked me up and down before saying, "You're lost, aren't you?" I was still out of breath. I could barely speak. I was making a delivery, I managed to say between gasps. She quietly nodded. Come inside first. So I followed her into the house. Once inside, she handed me a cup of what I think was green tea. Drink this. I took a sip. To this day, I still remember how surprisingly good it tasted. It was one of the best cups of green tea I'd ever had. Even now, I still drink green tea from time to time. But I've never tasted another cup like that one. After I finished the tea, the woman looked at me and asked, Have you calmed down a little? Do you smoke? Yes, I answered. Do you have cigarettes with you? I do. She nodded. Take out 2 cigarettes. Light both of them. Leave one burning in front of the gate, and place the other beside it facing inward. Then smoke one yourself. I did exactly as she told me. I lit the 2 cigarettes and placed them where she instructed. Then I smoked one myself. When I finished and put it out, she smiled slightly. Good. Now leave through the back door. Walk between the walls, and don't look back. I followed her instructions. As soon as I stepped out the back door, it was as if the maze had disappeared. The path became perfectly clear, and I walked straight out to the main road without getting lost once. My motorcycle was still there. The engine was even still running. Since I'd supposedly completed the delivery, I opened the delivery app to mark the order as finished. But when I checked my active orders, the delivery was gone. That shouldn't have been possible. Normally, once you accept a delivery request, a timer starts counting down. After the allotted time expires, it continues into overtime, showing +1 minute, +2 minutes, and so on. From my perspective, I'd been trapped there for almost an hour. I had never marked the order as completed. Yet the order had vanished. Even stranger, when I checked my phone, less than 10 minutes had actually passed. I got back on my motorcycle and returned to the delivery office. I couldn't concentrate on work anymore. I just sat there in silence, smoking cigarette after cigarette before eventually going home. But I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. A few days later, curiosity got the better of me, so I decided to go back. I followed the same road and managed to find the tunnel again. But this time, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. There were several warning signs posted near the entrance. There were warning signs posted around the entrance. No unauthorized entry. Restricted area under district office jurisdiction. Something like that. I was sure those signs hadn't been there the day it happened. So I thought, this is strange. Then I turned around, trying to find the shrine house where the woman had helped me. But it was gone. The flag I clearly remembered wasn't there anymore. Instead, it was just an ordinary house. As I was about to leave the alley, I noticed an elderly resident coming out of a nearby house. I decided to ask, Excuse me. Something strange happened to me around here the other day. A woman from what I think was a shrine house helped me. Wasn't the shrine located over there? The elderly person looked at me and replied, That used to be a shrine, yes. But it disappeared about 10 years ago. I was stunned. But something happened to me there just yesterday. How is that possible? The elderly resident simply continued. During the Japanese occupation, collaborators were said to have hidden money and valuables somewhere inside that tunnel. It's much deeper than people think, and no one has ever fully explored it. I've also heard stories that independence fighters, and even innocent people, were buried somewhere inside. Whether those stories were true or just local rumors, I couldn't say. But after everything I experienced that night, I've never been able to explain it. And that's the story I wanted to share with you today.